What's going on, guys? Give it 1 sec. Homie should jump in any minute now. There we go. Yeah, it's bad. There we go. Yes, first try. The last,
Hey, what's poppin'?
the last three of these I tried to do, we had all kinds of problems trying to get connected. So,
Can you hear me all right?
yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah,
Perfect.
super easy that time. How you doing, man?
Oh, dude, I'm awesome. How about yourself, dude? It's been a minute.
It has been a while, man. It's been a while.
Yes, sir.
Doing well. Yeah, no complaints. Had worse years for sure. You know,
Yeah, same,
you
same.
know. I
Last year
mean,
was a crazy one. Yeah.
last year was tough. Last year was, I think, for a lot of people, man. A lot of people are still on it. It's been the last 18 months in general is just, but things have picked up a little bit this year. Can't complain.
Oh yeah, man. Happy to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, man, once I started doing the seed thing full time, it's been great since, it was one of the greatest decisions I made was just dropping everything else and just doing seeds full time.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wishing I'd done more of that, but doing everything else is sort of insane. So I
Yeah.
definitely. Um, I'm glad you're able to do it though, man, because you've got a lot of amazing lines out there that are just,
Thank you.
if you're a hash. Honestly, it doesn't really matter. Everything I've run from you that I've washed, I've managed to, I take samples to dry and try, and everything was absolutely ridiculous. So I mean,
Awesome.
there's a lot of appeal and cool stuff to be hunted.
Yeah. I mean, man, it's just one of those where like I had so much access to stuff and just my seed collection was getting out of control. I had all this stuff that I was just like, bro, I've just got to pop and start working lines. And that's just really, I was kind of glad I did it when I did because like you, I've done just about everything. I've done just about everything in the business from edibles to extracts to, everything in between. And, it just, the market's so weird right now with states that are kind of half legal, half not. There's so many
Yeah.
places that are just kind of fucking struggling through right now. Everything on the West Coast is kind of fucked up right now. And it's like, nothing's getting fixed or better fast,
No,
you know?
no. And I think the only way that you stay relevant during times like that are bringing new fire, new flavors to the table. That is the
So,
only way that you stay relevant in that sort of market.
yep.
And to do that, man, you got to be in a position, whether or not you're risking the biscuit or not, to hunt these flavors. And so
Yeah.
that definitely makes the pool a little bit smaller. And like these days, from like what I was seeing 5 to 8 years ago, in a way, there's more craft breeders, but a lot of these bigger companies I feel sort of fell out. And now people are focusing more on the craft guys who are doing more
Yep.
specific things, or even so providing more of a variety than taking the same proven male from 2011 and still doing
Right.
things with it in 2023, so.
You know where I think a lot of that came from, though? a lot of that came from the overall shutdown of the cup circuit. Like the fact that like so many of those big breeders that everybody knows were literally surviving strictly on, being able to do every single cup in a year. And it's like once California kind of shut down the whole cup party free markets, that had a big effect on how some of these bigger places could advertise. Oh, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
I said, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear
Okay,
you.
sorry. I had a call, which I'm actually about
No, you're
to
good.
fix.
Don't
All
worry.
right, cool. Bam.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, a lot of those bigger brands, especially, they lived by the cup circuit. So it was all about, if you can't do 35 cups a year, your money's fucked up. 2020 brought so many people to the seed business, because everybody had extra money. Everybody was getting those stimmy checks. Everybody was just pissing money away. And let's be honest, man. I think a lot of us didn't necessarily need that money at the time. And for a lot of us, it was just like, you know what? Like, it's just free cash. So many people were buying luxuries and just
Oh, yeah.
buying seeds and buying guns and shoes, like there really was a
Cars
lot
and
of just like
house.
making it rain money, you know. Yeah, the gun market, especially in 2020, was, dude, those guys couldn't keep guns on the shelf. And it was just like, if you're in any kind of industry like that, yeah, you were making bank in 2020.
Oh,
And
definitely.
it's like now, so many of those places have almost been pushed out of the market just simply because it's so oversaturated, It's just, there's so many seed vendors. Everybody wants to be a seed bank. Like, I can't count how many people hit me up and are like, hey, man, like, I'm launching my new seed bank. Do you want to be, one of my first breeders? And
No,
I'm
I don't
like,
want to sell you my
no,
seeds for half the price at a
yeah, I
cost of
don't
when
want to
you
sell
ship
you
them.
my seed for half the price and do 100% of the advertising.
Good.
I'm good. It's just,
Yeah.
no. And it's
That
like, oh, go ahead.
No, that I was gonna say that's really smart. I respect the way that you've just gone direct to, because I know you're working your lines directly. You're actually doing it, and you're able more often than not to give really good examples of what is in this or what it's that or what its characteristics are. Depending on whatever it is, versus talking to a guy with a seed bank who's handling so many different ones. You're really not going to get that. And most people that defer their seeds or products to banks, that customer service more often than not, unless you find a cut or this dude's, big on social media or he's helping you market in some way, most of those guys don't give you the time of day, as to where
Yeah.
uh, people like you that I've seen take more time to actually either educate your people or be very direct with them, which if you're hunting for hash or whatever, it's incredibly helpful versus, beating
Yeah.
around the bush like a lot of
Yeah,
marketing does.
that's absolutely clutch. Like having that communication with growers, it's one thing when you can do it in your grow, and the whole thing that's tough is like to be a breeder, you have to grow great weed for every situation. I mean, you have to breed great weed for every grow
Yeah.
situation, which is really tough because it might grow great in ideal circumstances, and then the first time it gets a little bit of stress or a little bit of headache, you come to realize like that's
Yeah.
a lot of strains will grow great in a perfect environment, but how many of us are growing in absolutely perfect environments 100% of the time? Like, it's just not that. And it's like with hash especially, the process of just breeding for extracts is so finicky because I could give you 100 seeds and I could tell you they wash great, but until you find that one that puts out what you're looking for and dumps and puts out something that people want to smoke as rosin, like it's
Yeah.
it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of having that kind of that crowdsourcing of other people being able to run it in their commercial grows, run it in their hash labs, and then give me feedback about what they're seeing and stuff like that's absolutely
That's
clutch,
awesome.
clutch, clutch.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear that, dude.
And it's like, know, so when I got involved with seeds, like my passion has always been hash.
I know. I
My
remember.
passion's always been extracts, It's always been that way. And since the minute I found hash, like it changed my life in such a way that like that's one of the things that I've always chased. And so when I got into genetics, I always kind of thought that like if I breed for hash, it's gonna smoke great. Like I've never met an amazing hash cultivar that just didn't smoke well as flower if it was well grown,
You're not
But it
wrong.
doesn't work the other way.
No.
Just because it's beautiful flower doesn't mean it's gonna dump 5% and everybody's gonna love the rosin. Like
Absolutely.
it's two different worlds. And
Yeah.
so the old school way of breeding was just kind of big nugs and lots of resin, you know, and then it led us to strains like your sweet tooths and your, you know, a lot of these strains that had big trikes, little heads.
Yeah.
And so now, so we have so many people making extracts, so many different hash labs, and the commercialization's getting bigger that we're finally seeing more and more people who are like, okay, we want just great hash strains.
Yep.
And it's like, that's not been a thing previous to, if it grew great in a commercial garden, big nugs and heavy resin, it was great. It was a keeper.
Yeah.
But it's like now the market is so much different, and there's so many people that are like specifically looking for terps, for resin content. But I think generally speaking, going forward, we're going to see more of that than just make it grow for a light. You know?
Absolutely. You know, in the same aspect of growers talking about, you know, this cut giving you for light, how do you feel about growers or breeders that are saying this cut specifically gives you 5%? You know?
Okay, so it's one of the most dishonest things in seeds right now that's not really being discussed. If somebody sells you a seed and they tell you that that seed is going to produce X amount of percentage in wash, they are fucking lying straight to your
Oh,
face.
yeah.
At best, they've guessed. At worst, they're being intentionally dishonest.
Yeah.
Because from no amount of seed can I hand you a seed and say, this seed is going to produce X. Not possible. Now, I can tell you the other plants that I've seen yield well. I can tell you a range of what I've seen. But if I tell you it does 5% and you pop a seed and it does 3%, you're going to call me a
No,
liar.
for
The
sure.
truth is, from 100 seeds, you're going to see every different percentage of yield under the sun.
Every
And
expression.
that's the nature of water hash. It's so finicky that the strain that's going to throw big heads, it's going to throw down in the wash, it's going to hold up to the press and still be, and the water, and still be terpy. Those strains are few and far between.
Yep.
1 in 10,000. I mean, and that's why so many of the people in the hash world that have really crushed the hash world, in competitions especially, they find a cut and they run that bitch till it's dead.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, once you, I don't know, I don't want to talk any shit because I got a lot of homies that have won cups with one cut. We know a few that we could name that took them cuts and they made, you know, decorated hash competitions,
Yep.
every one of them. So it's like there's a lot of that in the hash world, and that's why they're so coveted. It's because when you find that one that really breaks everything, you just hold that with two fists as hard as you can.
Absolutely, you know, and I think, you know, people are just now, if they're lucky, they're claiming to find cuts like that, using them in very quick, you know, I don't want to say that, you know, maybe they're pollen chucking. I don't want to say they're breeding because I would be giving them more credit. They're pollen chucking it to whatever's hot and then telling you that they've now made a new list of heavy
Yeah.
washers. And I'm seeing a lot of that.
And the other thing that's so dishonest is that, so if I take a cut, and let's say I take that Stronana cut that everybody loves in Colorado that just dumps, it's super common around Fort Collins and around Boulder and stuff, like the 14er cut, right? If I take that cut and I make crosses with it, there's no guarantee that those seeds are going to produce hash well.
No, yeah.
Almost the opposite.
Yeah.
You know, there's a higher chance you're going to find hundreds of strains or hundreds of seeds that don't produce well, and you might find that one that, just like its mother, produces super, super well in the hash department.
Yep.
And some strains we can talk about, like your purple punches and your slurricanes. There's a couple of strains that are used in a breeder's quiver that we can all usually say are going to produce generally nicer hash plants. Right? There's some that breed well and that we can just tell they're just beautiful hash plants. But there's a lot of times where just because you breed a mother or a father who's known to produce hash, that doesn't guarantee that every seed is going to produce great hash. Like, it just doesn't, you know?
No, because I think, okay, so in a weird sense, I'll try to explain this without sounding stupid. In the way that you would breed for something that gives you an expression, like let's talk certain strains like GMO. GMO has a very strong genetic expression, whatever you cross it to, genuinely speaking. Purple Punch. There's certain hybrid strains that are fairly new that because of their dominating parent, male, female, parentage or lineage, have more dominant traits that carry over. I don't think that
Yeah.
the washing, or the specific phenotype of a special head that carries over within that family is something that necessarily carries over, as well as the genetic profile of, dominant terpenes, which
It's
is what
too
I
rare.
think people don't understand.
It's too rare in the gene pool. If it were more dominant, we would see it in these crosses. Like you'd be able to just bang something to say purple punch, and every strain would wash, or at least
Or not
60% of
harm.
them would. You'd see, or right, exactly. You'd see larger populations. So the problem that we're seeing when we come into hash, especially with water hash, is that it's not as simple as it just throws a lot of trichomes in the water. Because if it throws a lot of trichomes in the water, but then they're super waxy and I lose most of that to the rosin press, then you're still not having the great, everybody gives you yields in your wash numbers.
Yeah.
Most people don't quote you finished rosin yields.
Yeah.
That's the relevant number that nobody wants to talk about. Because if it dumps 6%, but you lose 3% of that to the bag because it's all wax, it didn't really yield.
No.
You didn't really do 5%
No,
out the door.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And being on the metric side of things, where I'm at now, it most definitely matters. So, you
Yeah.
look at that shit and it's asked of you as a processor. So those numbers matter absolutely. But as a whole, when people talk about that, through marketing or whatever, they absolutely don't, This pulled 8%, but like I said, 4 got lost in the squish. So like, really? I mean, 4, that's cool, but you're not talking about 4%
Yeah,
to
we're
begin with.
not talking about true 6-star that can just on its own sit on the shelf and I don't have to rosin it.
Yeah.
So the truth is, like, if the end goal is going to be rosin, then the loss to the rosin press matters, implicitly matters. So 5% to the wash doesn't necessarily mean you got 5% of 6-star hash you didn't have to press. Like, that's just not your finished number. Like, what did it do after the bag?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
the real yield. Because there's so much fickle shit with the terpene profiles. How much of that oil is going to get left in the water? How much of it's going to be able to stay in that head long enough to get into your hash? It's so fickle. Whereas if we're just blasting it, to give me that grease, just give me that nasty grease. Just give me that shit that nobody wants to work with. Like just that nasty terpene. But that stuff won't wash.
No,
It just,
no.
it's just, that stuff is like, it's such a fine trichome, such a fine line with the trichomes of something that's going to wash well, yield well, and not give up every bit of its yield to the rosin press. Like, you're going to end up with 6% out the door. Now we're talking.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, now we're talking.
Yeah.
6% finished rosin yields, now we're talking
100%.
about something you should be bragging about.
Which
but that's the problem.
Don't.
Yeah, there's so much dishonesty in seeds because the market is so saturated. So you see so many of these people that go, well, hey, the reality is if I call it $300 a pack, they're going to look at it as a premium product just because it's higher on the shelf, just because it's marketed as more expensive.
Yeah.
And the reality is so much of what we're now seeing and we call hype between us is just marketing money.
Oh, of course.
It's just how much marketing money do you have to blanket your product, to get your product out there, and to just saturate the market? Because let's be honest, it's been some years now since a strain on its own went viral, became that strain. Probably GMO. GMO would probably be the last one that I could say wasn't because the breeder spent massive amounts of money marketing the strain. Like nobody even knew who bred GMO for the longest time. Like it was one of those things that there was so much, like until it finally became real clear as to where GMO came from. That was probably the last strain I could think of that went like super viral, became the strain, hype as fuck, that was nothing but just pure hype. Like it wasn't marketing. What's this?
Makamo Seeds, supposedly the Chem Cookies old stock is where that GMO came from.
Yep.
From what I hear.
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't opened the pack, but there we go.
That didn't become obvious for a while, though. There was a long time, though, where, like, it's the strains that go viral like that become, like, huge strains naturally. It's usually there's a lot of, like, either a cut got out from a homie or somebody gave a cut and something got, and there's some
Yeah,
contention. So there's a good beef story that goes with it.
always.
The weed world loves a good beef
Dude,
story or a
as
I
sure as the
found it on
sun
Dead
sets,
Tour story.
yep, and it rises. There's some way that your cut's going to get out of a place you don't want it to, which is why I like jars of hash versus giving people nugs of my finished work. You're not going to find a fucking seed in my
Yeah,
hash,
yeah,
homie.
that's true.
You're going to
That's true.
taste everything, like I
Yeah.
think personally being able to share that in flavor expressions is great, but I'll keep my flower to myself for that reason.
Are you still doing a lot of CBD stuff?
I sort of, yeah. I have some people in a couple places still running my testers essentially. The last I left off, I was running GMO ACDC bubblegum
Interesting.
that I've
Yeah.
been working on. So the end result is still very bubblegum dominant, CBD dominant flower with really almost washable heads. Like a lot better than we were at with just the ACDC. So my goal was to try to get a better cultivar for solventless CBD washing. And then I've got a couple other ones, dude. I did a couple in Oklahoma that I sort of paused on. And then I found a really awesome DJ Shorts Blueberry to Mountain Trop F1. I found this really funky male that just had these amazing expressions, this like most beautiful Kush-like structure, and the leaves were just like they're almost indigo. It was a weird plant. So I let him do his thing to all of the crazy girls that I had at the time. The ACDC GMO bubblegum, a bunch of chem crosses, and a couple other ones that I got to dig through. And I see, actually, I have all my seeds next to me. It's like the one pack I can't find.
Yeah, that Trop Cookies is like a cheat code too. Like that's the one thing that we don't talk about enough. But the problem with the Trop Cookies is getting away from the tangy, because like there's so much tangy, and like maybe it's just me, maybe I've just had
Oh,
enough of it. But if
no,
I never
same here.
tasted another wet cardboard fake citrus tangy, like I
Need
just
more
don't.
tangy, please.
Yeah, and it's like that's the thing about Trop Cookies is that there's so many just generic candy or just generic tangy profiles that if you hit it with something that's like super terpy, you can usually kind of get like a bunch of them that are like really terpy
Yeah,
but still have that trichome. But that's another one that's like a cheat code to great hash. Like
exactly.
there are some that like arguably you can say this is going to have a higher percentage than not. Like I could say this is probably going to be a great washer, but I wouldn't ever be dumb enough to tell somebody like this is going to throw 5%.
No.
As soon as you say that, somebody's going to pull 2.5%, and and that's the other thing that I ask people. So like, what are you actually quoting? The best that you ever saw from that? You're quoting 5% as like the best looking strain you ever saw, because that's surely not your average. That's surely not an average from 250 plants of what your yield was. You're surely not pulling 5% as an average yield. So when you hand somebody mixed pheno seeds, it's
Yeah.
nobody's doing deep line filial breeding to the point where
No.
every one of your 10 seeds looks identical and has the identical profile, and like nobody's doing that.
No one's
Nobody's
making
doing
sweet corn yet.
it. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, no. And I mean, gotta be honest, I think we're a long ways away from that, because I don't know that really the market right this minute is dictating that. Like the market right now is exploding in ways that people want variety, people want something they've never seen before, people want unique. But then you get into like all that nuance of like, well, why are you growing wheat? If it's for flour, you're going to have a different expectation of what these plants are going to do than if you're washing. If you're blowing
100%.
BHO, you're going to have a completely different, prerogative on what your outlook is and what you're looking for than somebody who's running, water hash.
Yeah.
And it's stark. It's very stark. And the more you get into the commercial side, it's got to be everything to
Yeah.
everybody. It's got to grow great. It's got to yield well. It's got to yield well in the water. It's got to yield well in the raws.
But it
It's
can't be too much
great.
of one thing. It has to be a generally and that's very hard to do, which is why you see a lot of GMO and trop
Right.
crosses and everything now, because
A lot of that is
commercially it's
just
viable almost.
people threw up a W with it, and now everybody thinks that it's just going to be win working with it. And it's another one of like the industry chasing its own tail. you know, something becomes hot, and then instead of being creative and saying, oh, okay, I see people want unique in this direction, people just go, I'm just going to copy what you did and just reprint that same success over and over and over. It just doesn't work like that. Then you end up with situations where the market for that strain, whatever it is so watered down because you don't know how many people are growing S1s, how many people are growing a bag seed that just hermed, how many people have the real cut. So you see so much of that, of like that's the other thing I don't really work with a lot is like hype cuts.
Yeah.
Just for the simple fact that like I don't ever want anybody trying to check me on where my shit came from because I don't give a
Yeah.
fuck.
It's
Like, I
like,
just don't
dude,
fucking care. You know?
hate validating that shit. I mean, there's
It's
okay,
so right.
so here's where I'll pause and say, okay, like so back home in Miami, you know, growing up with certain strains like the Cuban Black Haze and the Miami Mango, there's certain ones like undeniably you're like, that's it. You know, like as sure as blue is blue and green is green, that is it. And I think like you can't call those land races, but those are just culturally locked in time, the same way that OGs to the
Yeah.
West Coast and
Yeah.
Chem to the East, you know, and like, you know, sour, you know, a little
Sour
bit
to the
more, you know,
to New England, yeah.
yep. You know, it's like, you know, South Florida had the hazes essentially. So in situations like that where it's undeniable, that's great. But you'll see now, you know, it's very easy to tell the real deal versus something that's been watered down. You see it a lot in, you know, commercial settings where people swear they've got, you know, the original this or that, specifically in Florida, and they try to bring it to market, and it's
Yeah. There's a lot of that too that I found comes from people who excessively pay for cuts. So when you pay 10 grand for a cut, you best believe you're going to get pissed off when somebody else says they got the fucking cut too. They didn't pay up 10 grand for it. So that's where that shit matters, is because so many of these breeders get invested in trying to play off somebody else's hype. And as soon as something becomes hype, they're just like, I don't care how much money, you tell me how much money, I'll give you whatever you want for the cut so that I can be the first one to bastardize it, water it down, so I can be the first one out there pumping out cuts of it. And it's just like, man, find your own fucking lane. Find your own fucking lane. Like, find a flavor, find something unique to do for yourself instead of just like, what's hype this week, what's hot this week, how can I rip that off?
yeah. I you know me, bro. I've been doing a lane specifically on and off for a very long time, and I still do. You know, like still hunting for solventless CBD, still doing my, you know, my type 1 hunts now and really getting back into, you know, THC dominant expressions for washing, since I'm really just full-time washing now or what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But it never stops, dude, you know, and I understand that fully, where like literally before I jumped on here with you, I posted my, you know, my little mini seed vault, what I have with me, you know, like always have seeds with you no matter
Yeah,
what,
yeah, yeah.
right? And he had, you know, he's a great grower. But it's the truth, you know, instead of people, you know, crossing all this hype to this hype to this hype, I wish they'd go back into their vaults and actually pop what they bought, you know, and like people aren't doing that enough, I think. And this is why we keep seeing this regurgitated shit. You know, when you and I talked about the last couple of strains of being standout, you know, I can think of like, you know, GMO, you know, Gorilla Glue,
GG4.
Trop,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but we're not talking about any of those like pies or, you know, any of like the sweet runts, and we're not mentioning that for a reason. You know, it's super overplayed from a breeding aspect. Don't get me wrong, the flavors are fun to smoke and the candy strains are cool. You know, I'd rather just smoke Skittles, but you know, everything has its place. But like from a breeding aspect, if everyone's growing all the same shit and you're checking out material, you know, and it's literally 50, 11 different versions of a runts or a pie or a cake, it does get really old, you know, like
Yeah.
with the exceptions of like grape cream cake and ice cream cake. Yeah, they wash great, you know, and those are two strains that do predominantly well in their crosses. But regardless, aside from those, you know, I still stand by that statement where it's like we're not.
Every one of those that you named are strains that became hype because of marketing money.
Yeah,
They're not strains that naturally just went hype because everybody and their brother had to have it. It
no,
was because the people on the internet told them they had to have that. So it's like, let's be honest. I'm going to be really honest with you for a minute. Runts is not the greatest weed on the planet. It's not. It's not the prettiest weed. doesn't dump as well as other strains. It's not the most amazing flavor profile. It's not something so unique. Everybody just needs to try it. It's just hype.
Yeah.
Just hype. It's just marketing money,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And there's a certain amount of like, I don't hate on that because that's the way the world's going with weed, is that it will inevitably be who spends the most marketing money.
Yeah.
But the thing that we, you, I, other people that matter involved with the industry have to explain to people and constantly tell people is there's a reason that's hype. There's better strains out there. There's other things out there. And I'm not saying my stuff. I'm not saying your stuff. Just be willing to get in the seeds, pop some stuff. Like you said, pop some older stuff, you know, pop something that sounds unique or sounds weird. And, you know, it's not just the 8 strains that everybody on the internet's talking about, because most of that literally just comes down to who paid Instagram the most money, who paid, you know, the ad agency the most money. Those blue logos are really cute. They're really cute, and everybody loves to have a fanny pack with one on it, but that don't get you high.
No.
I can't smoke the fucking Cookies logo, and no matter how much I try. And my hope was, now that they brought on what I would consider to be a legitimate breeder to work with them, I hope we see better. I hope going forward we start to see something from that camp that is legitimately dank. But I'm going to be honest with you, man. I don't. They do really well at spending money on advertising.
Yeah,
the marketing, the branding, you can't argue with them.
Dude,
but when I see the strains in real life in front of my face, when I see the best examples of them, I almost always go, I've seen better. I mean, it's not bad weed. Purple gets everybody. Purple weed gets everybody. It's one of those things that the darker you will sucker custies all day long with just dark, beautiful, dark white weed. Purple and black. Purple and white.
Bag appeal.
You know, instant bag appeal. Sold. Most people would pay twice for it. You know, but the reality is getting in there and actually having a strain that's not just, it's a little candy and a little gas. Come on, man.
Everything, and that's becoming everything, and that's getting old, you know. So like, oh man, like you said, going back and popping into old seeds and really just getting into flavors that, like you said, something that's weird, something that no one has. You might end up with something that literally is truly unique, and you can maybe, like I said, a lot of the stuff being regurgitated, we're just technically muddling the gene pools as we keep, you know, swapping these, you know, polyhybrids, and really just they're becoming so redundant at this point that it's almost like, is it becoming the new tobacco, you know, like, and that's sad, you know, when really there are just some amazing strains, some amazing breeders, some really cool expressions to be found outside of what's hype. I don't even pay attention anymore, dude. I don't follow a lot of those dudes because it was just overhyped marketing. Like, the seed packs look really cool, don't get me wrong. Like, if I had a problem with like needing to catch them all, then yeah, I would want them. But I genuinely, I really try to focus on breeders that I know have been rocking and working genetics, or really, you know, true to what they say versus what they're trying to market. You know, there's really a point where, you know, you want to respectably give your product and your work, you know, a proper avenue, a proper package, you know, and all those things. Completely understandable. But there's a point where that scale moves, and it's just like, are you really just, you know, did you work on the packaging as much as you really, you know, worked on the lines? And that's the question that I'm seeing a lot. So
let me say this, okay? So like one thing that I noticed in working both myself and in some of the places that the wife worked at, that there's companies that don't produce anything. They're literally just a branding and marketing outfit. They find a licensed grow that can provide them product. And I'm not saying this is what's happening with any one particular brand. I'm just saying that this is very common within the legal weed industry now. Of, I have 100,000 followers. We have a lifestyle brand, right? And what we're going to do now is we're going to partner with this hash lab. We're going to use their products. We're going to use their pens. We're going to use all of their stuff. We're just going to put our branding on it, you know? And it's like, that is the one thing you're starting to see more and more of, are companies that don't have a vested interest in cannabis beyond the fact that they can market their other branding within a cannabis context. So we're starting to see a lot of these companies that are forming that are just large marketing firms that have realized they can glom onto weed and they can, latch onto terps and flavors or hash, whatever the marketing thing of the week is. And then they can essentially find other grows or other hash places they're not necessarily responsible for every gram they produce. Once again, I'm not trying to say that's a situation, because some of these places are just great at marketing and they grow their own stuff. But the world of the lifestyle brand as associated with cannabis brands is becoming super common, and probably more so in California, where those kind of partnerships are a little easier. That wasn't the case for a long time in Colorado, and then that kind of changed, and then you could do that sort of stuff of just like, we're a branding company. We don't have any hands in the production, the processing. We just get finished pins from them with hash in them. We'll slap our labeling onto them, mark them up, and sell them to dispensaries.
Yep.
And once again, I mean, it's brilliant marketing. Yeah. But I think I always say, everybody's a custody to somebody. Just know when you're the custody. You know what I'm saying? And like, just know when you're the customer and be knowledgeable about whatever it is that you're, because that's the truth. Like, everybody's a custody to somebody. None of us produces 100% of everything that we need or produce.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody.
You don't produce your own food, you're getting custody. Congratulations.
You're a custody to somebody. We're all a custody to somebody. And that keeps you humble, too, in the sense that, like, understand that, like, even when you're on top, there's always somebody on the bottom. And even when you're on the bottom, there's somebody always on the top. Know which part of it, know when you're the customer, and know what you're buying into. So it's like, I'm not saying if you love runts and that's your favorite strain, go get it, go smoke it, love it to death. But also know there's other stuff out there. And that's the only difference, know when you're being marketed to, know when you're being sold to.
Yeah. And I think people, and then the whole thing is, it's super frustrating that I've seen when people are buying, they sort of, some of them don't even give a fuck if it's whatever it is. They're just looking at a number and they're like, how much THC is in this? And I was just like, it's the wreck you moment where just like, okay, cool. All that work doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, most people that are buying on that level that don't know are just saying, hey, what's going to fuck me up the most? And, we know that one of the most weird and accurate things about this industry and any aspect of it is cannabis testing. Like, it's fucking weird and wonky. So it's not surprising to see dog shit test for like, 25%, or, Oklahoma's ruthless with like the 45s and 32s, like every day, every harvest. You're like, wow, you guys are just crushing it. So it's very misleading. And, there's a whole generation of people that are buying weed based on that number, and I think that's something that I wish more people would try to lean toward, into trying to educate people otherwise, which is very hard sometimes at that level.
And that's kind of the backbone behind a lot of the breeding that I've done, is that a lot of what I try to explain to people is that 18% with shitloads of myrcene is going to knock you on your fucking ass harder than 32% THC and no terps. Yeah. No discernible terps. I always tell people, if you just want to get high on THC, get distillate, and you're going to understand real quick why most of us don't casually smoke distillate unless we have to. Yeah. It's like pure THC is super boring. Delta 8 by itself is super boring. Most of the ancillary cannabinoids by themselves are super boring. It's not, most of what you appreciate of getting high is because of everything else that's there and the way that it works in synergy. And that's the thing for us, is like batting that to people over and over, and like, terps matter. 30% THC is worthless. Nobody gives a fuck about 30% THC. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not the goal. We achieved that ages ago. It's not advancing the gene pool. No. We're not pushing anything forward by having greater amounts of THC, because we have extracts. Mm-hmm. And with extracts, you can have absolutely pure THC if that's what you want. Yeah. But high THC in flower doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get you significantly higher. Now, a broad terpene profile and a reasonable amount of THC would wreck a day. Absolutely. And that's the big difference. And that's the thing, And doing these or in talking to other people who maybe don't see that side of the industry sometimes of like everything in the weed world isn't great. And most people aren't necessarily trying to push you what's best. They're trying to push you what's marketable. And high THC
Yeah.
is super marketable. That doesn't necessarily mean you're buying better weed because of it, you know?
You know, but eventually, that's the thing. Most people hope and usually fall out of that loop where one time they're going to get something that, you know, at 17, 18% for some reason they couldn't get their 30% garbage, and they'll try it and smell it and be like, this tastes like something. This is a completely different experience. And once they get that terpene entourage effect, and like when it's all together, you have a different kind of buyer, you know, patient, whatever, that's now looking at it a different way. I just hate that initial, you know, you have, unless people know people like us, or, you know, they're just somewhat on it about being educated, they don't ever escape that loophole, or they stay away from it. They fear it, you know, older people
Weed just tastes
specifically.
like weed. Yeah, weed just tastes like weed. I know people have been smoking their entire lives, older than me, and weed still just tastes like weed. You can give them 100 strains of the greatest, dankest weed, and they're just going to tell you weed tastes like weed.
Isn't that frustrating?
That's
It's
the, you know, we had a huge discussion about this not too long ago about how, you know, different palates affect different people, different exposure affects different people. So like if you only see one strain of weed, every time you go buy weed, you get one strain of weed, you're probably not going to notice until you get something that's just amazing that, wow, this is different. This is significantly different than the shit in a Mylar that I normally get, you know? That difference is what some of us are chasing like it's the goal, is that uniqueness, that thing. Once you find that strain,
yeah,
whether it's a citrus or the first time you really find dank gas, or, you
gas.
know, it happens for a lot of us, but there's that moment where you go, oh, I see now. And see, like there's other things in my life, like I'm a tequila drinker and I love expensive tequila, but I can't get in that same conversation that I can get into with
Yeah,
hash, because I'm going to be honest, it didn't really taste like tequila to me. And
yeah.
it's just one of those funny things that from tequila, there's not significant differences.
No,
There's
they're
slight
subtle.
differences in certain ways. It's very subtle. Whereas if you got a citrus and you got a floral and you got a gas, it's real easy to tell those are not the same. They're
Absolutely.
not, you know, but once again, sometimes too, it's finding those opportunities to have it pure.
Yeah.
So when you buy weed, you're at the mercy of how was it dried, how was it cured, how fresh is it, all of this. But when you can produce it for yourself, you can see live plants, you can see 8 in a room, and you can see the very distinct differences as they grow, then it's a little easier to understand.
Yep.
But until you've had kind of those hands-on experiences, most people will never see it. They'll never understand that, like, you know, there's a huge difference here. Like I said, I know people older than myself that it's just weed. It's just weed.
Yeah. And what you can, and what you just mentioned can literally be done in like a tent grow. You know, it can be literally right in front of you with one pack, you know, of something to try. I encourage everyone to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of those things that's clutch. Like when you start to get into the discussions of legality, your state's gone legal, you know, what's our opportunity for home grow? The biggest goal should just be getting every state legal.
Yeah.
Because the thing that we won't talk about is that what happens when it goes rec is now your 4-light grow isn't a priority for law enforcement. Your fucking pound of weed isn't a priority for law enforcement, because now they have to regulate all of these grows and all of these things and all of these licenses. So the reality is, if you live in a rec legal state and you don't have a grow, you're the fucking problem. Everybody should do it because it's going to save you money. If you smoke weed, buying supplies has never been easier. Has never been easier. You can buy your entire grow off of Amazon tomorrow for probably cheaper than you could buy it in a grow store sometimes. You know, and it's like that availability has given everybody in a legal state that opportunity to finally see, you know, all of these different I joke that's why Blue Dream will always be a staple as long
Yeah.
as we do this piecemeal legalization thing. As long as there's another state next month that can go legal, and
Blue
now all of those
Dream.
people can finally taste that Blue Dream they've been hearing so much about in high times.
Yeah. And
You
that
know,
drop cherry and
the
super boof. And, oh, fuck, man.
right, right, yeah,
It's,
and I mean, it's not one of those things because we've all been there. We were all at a point in our lives where weed was just a thing that you found when you got it. And then a lot of times it was access, right? It was access to more strains, more varieties. You finally found a grower or you grew it yourself, so you were able to get it fresh. That's the other big thing is you're not getting weed that was grown in NorCal in 2018. You're not getting their 4-year-old light depths and,
yeah.
like you're actually getting fresh fucking weed off your grow.
Yeah.
That's a big game changer. Just being able to see the process, have access to more flavors. It's at that point you can start to say, oh, I kind of see what you're saying. That one's citrusy. Like that one has a lot of like lemony stuff.
Learning how to properly cure your flower so you can taste everything you just said.
Right.
Huge part of
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah. And
most definitely agree.
through most of
Sorry.
the 70s, the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the problem wasn't necessarily that the weed was poorly grown. It was almost always the post-processing, the harvesting, so much of the stuff that came from Mexico, if you were from the South, that stuff was all baled the fuck up, mostly still wet.
Yeah.
So there was often like problems with mold and shit like that. And so by the time it got to the US, you're looking at shit that's, maybe 6 months old, 8 months to a year, if you're lucky. And it's like, it was obviously produced in bulk, shipped together wet, and didn't give a shit about
Yeah.
it. It was almost always poorly processed, poorly harvested, poorly handled. And it's like the reality is if you ever got it and it looked good, it wasn't that, you'd get green brick weed and you'd be like, holy shit, this isn't fucking terrible. Like, why did y'all slam this into a brick?
Yeah.
Like this was fresh. This looks like it would be all right.
Yeah, right. If you just drop in the back seal and lightly just seal it, don't,
You don't
like, come on.
have to do the full pull. Yeah, right.
Uh,
Right.
yeah, no, I've seen
Yeah.
that, just from growing those seeds from like really green and what's coming out is just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Yeah. We all did that early on. Like before I had tons of access to seeds, I had swagweed or green weed and just decent seeded weed. And you just like, hey, fuck it, it's cheap seed. Let's just play with it and see what it does. And they grew decent plants.
Yeah,
They
it's
might
great
have been a little
practice.
more acclimated like sativas towards, the climate and stuff. But the reality is those are the backbones of a lot of the strains we're running today to some form or fashion, right? Because
Yeah,
those were the strains that later become bred with other stuff and bred with other stuff. And we're now dealing with the great, 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 great grandchildren,
yep.
So
I
there were
just,
great genetics. There was always great genetics there. It was just a matter of the selections making them grow better indoors, which is a huge thing that we take for granted now.
yeah.
Is just the ability to take a plant and it grow in an artificial lighting, artificial humidity, not on the equator situation. Like that took decades of breeding.
Absolutely. Do you feel it, like you're saying, as the generations go on, we had genetics that were an amazing backbone that literally are still seen, in profiles that are made today and all sorts of hybrids that are being produced, even as we speak. There's someone checking seeds and pollen right now, like literally. It's insane. But at some point, things get muddled. Do you feel like enough breeders are either going back to older genetics or specifically going back to hunting, their own land races as their? I think one thing that is interesting now, it's a double-sided coin where it's almost easier to get in contact with people in those parts of the world and get genuine landrace seeds. The flip side to that is you have a lot of people that claim to have landrace seeds, so you have to be careful, but it is a thing, and you genuinely can, get your hands on it in a much easier fashion than you could even 30 years ago.
I
So,
don't think we necessarily have to go back to 1974 to find unique things in the gene pool, but I think always breeding with an eye forward and backward is always going to ensure we don't end up in those positions where we've got 3 strains and they all look and smell alike. The thing that we're seeing now that's amazing, as much as I hear about the bottleneck of the gene pool, and as much as polyhybrids, in a sense, inevitably aren't sustainable forever, the thing that I'm really refreshed by is the number of people that are breeding, which means that gene pool is expanding at a pace that we've never seen before, because
Yeah.
so many people have access to the ability to breed, and so many people are getting into it, and so many people are breeding strains that mean something to them. That's what I always tell people is, like, if you're going to breed what's important to you. Find something that you love, whether it's a flavor, whether it's a terpene profile, whether it's a cannabinoid profile, some unique thing that you love, and breed that, because that will ensure that that thing that you love makes it to the next generation. So when everybody gets into the, oh, well, skunk is dead and this is dead and this profile is dead, it's like, A, you're not popping enough seeds, because no profile is dead. Everything is still out there in some form. It might be a little more complex than when you had it in 74, but there's
Yep.
still skunky weed, there's still stinky weed, it's all out there. As long as there's people hunting those baseball cards, finding those Pokemon, as long as there's people that are chasing those profiles down, it's not going to change. It's just going to keep exploding at an exponential rate. We do have to have an eye towards that older stuff that's still unique. Like, that's where we go backwards to find the stuff we haven't seen before. We really don't know yet. And
Yeah.
that's, it's absolutely crucial, but I don't know that the answer is going all the way back to land race weed and just trying to reinvent the wheel. Because
Yeah.
I don't know that that's really a project that's all that profitable, all that really rewarding towards the gene pool, unless you find something that's just unbelievable. Like, if you
Yeah.
find something that's super unique and some landrace stuff, then yeah, it might be worth the decade to 20 years that it's going to take you to get that to a strain that's going to grow indoors for somebody. Otherwise, grow it in your little garden and enjoy it and love it. But if it's something that, you feel like it really needs to be out there, breed with it. Find it and breed it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. For me, it's on the hunt to stabilize a strain that has, um, something that can pass the genetic quality of better, better washable CBD heads, CBD dominant heads. That's literally been my thing now, going on year 10, dude. So yes, find something you're passionate about, a flavor, a reason, a cause, and fucking go after it. If you're sitting there collecting hype seeds like they're fucking Jordans or cards, I'm wrong. I love shoes.
We're
Whatever, it's cool.
we're almost out of time, but I gotta say, like, just in the thread of CBD resin, the thing about CBD washing is that it's absolutely the two extremes.
Yeah.
Either it's either it's so waxy it's not worth fucking with and they just don't break away, or it's so greasy you can't work with it. And it's like, that's been the infinite problem in the CBD wash industry, is that for so long the goal was just CBD.
Yeah.
It was just CBD. Nobody gave a fuck about resin quality. Nobody gave a fuck about just CBD. Haven't been CBD.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that we saw with THC through the late 90s. It's just THC, push the THC as high as we can go. We don't care about ancillary cannabinoids. We don't care about, rare terpene, unique terpene profile, just THC, CBD.
Yep.
So everything else becomes an afterthought. And it's like, now you're almost having to reinvent the wheel if you really want a CBD strain that washes well, because nobody's ever bred for that.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever really put long-term quality into trying to breed for something that's, to be honest, almost antithetical to the way that particular plant's been used, because CBD's either been hemp, it's either been, herd, it's either been stock, it's either been plant, or if you happen to be into CBD resin, it's just CBD flower. Nobody really cares that it, there's not that nuance like there is with THC flower.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we could do another hour on CBD washes, and I wish that I knew that was, like,
We should do
super
that.
passionate. We'll do that and we'll chat about it.
Absolutely.
So man, where can people find you?
You can follow me at @foxtrax_ on Instagram, or @foxtrax in the wild on Instagram, which shows sort of all the work I've done lately as a consultant, multi-state hash maker, and be posting more of the genetics work. Unfortunately, my main genetics page, which was Run CBD Genetics, got knocked down a while back. Since then, I haven't really focused on marketing it. I've just been working the lines, or
Yeah.
right now currently taking a break from it as I'm just washing hash. But yeah, man, I honestly, I've got a couple of projects where I'm hitting back and forth, and like I said, literally just planning to unload my whole vault. So again, thanks for having me, dude. I know we're running out of time here, but like I said, dude, it's been super awesome chatting, and I would love to chat about CBD washing in the future. It's something that no one really touches up on, and even what you said literally a couple minutes ago is more than most people will ever mention about it, in years' time.
Yeah, because most of the people that do washes that have even washed CBD stuff just go, yeah, not me, not me.
Yeah.
I'm good. Nah, it's just such a headache. It's just generally one of those things that it's so finicky. It's so fickle, finding the right fits. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we could do an hour just on that for sure. Yeah, we'll have to get you back on, man. The ones that go the fastest are always the ones that want to have people back on because, we do an hour and then it's just almost not enough. But thank you so much for coming
Anytime.
on. If you're ever looking for genetics from myself, www.terpfiend.com, terpfi3nd.com. At the moment, you can find me on Instagram at Terpfiend, terpfi3nd. Go there. Follow me somewhere other than Instagram because you never know how long it'll be before Instagram gets a hair up their ass. I tried to get verified this week. They said I haven't had an account long enough. They didn't say it wasn't important enough. They said I didn't have an account for long enough. So we're going to try 30 days again and see if I can get verified. Just for tips and giggles because they shut me down once a year. I lose an account once a year. So, go follow me somewhere else. YouTube, we got all these podcasts up. Reddit. Weed pictures. You want to see any of my work? We got all the weed pictures you can do.
Awesome.
Seeds, terpfiend.com. Thank you so much, dog. We'll do it again.
Anytime,
have a good
dude.
one, Fox.
You too, man. Enjoy the rest of your night.
You too, man.